And it's sound advice. So, but let's take a look then and discuss the small. We'll call it the smaller associations. I'm hard pressed to believe, and I'm sure they exist. When you're talking about a few hundred homes, even to not have a management company seems almost foolish. But let's go sub 50 units, and they have no management company, self-managed. What are you seeing as the big pitfalls from those groups right now?
The big pitfalls if you don't have a manager is that you need to keep up with all this stuff yourself. North Carolina, as you know, Justin, has a very strict statute when it comes to collecting assessments against people. I mean, the 47F 3-118 goes on for pages as to what you have to do when somebody doesn't pay their homeowner's dues, which in our world is called assessments. There are all these steps you have to take. There are all these notices you have to give. If you don't give those notices, if you don't take those steps, if you don't send a 15-day letter before you get more serious about collections, all sorts of bad things can happen. And I mean that quite seriously. It's the same also with enforcement. One of the reasons people move into associations is because they want there to be some control over, will someone be fixing a car on blocks in their front yard next to me? Probably not. Can somebody put up 100 political signs? Well, probably not. And that's because the restrictions likely put controls on what people can do. That's that part that you mentioned about whether you like being told what to do or not. And if you don't follow the right steps in enforcing the provisions of the Declaration against owners, you can also get in a lot of trouble. So the two areas we most often see associations who are doing it on their own mess up deals with trying to go after people for their dues and trying to go after people for what they feel is a violation of the documents.
A lot of the associations and over the years, right? So my transactional practice I exited at the end of 2021. So I'm not participating in residential closings at this point by any stretch of the imagination. But a lot of the calls I would get from people were, "Hey, my association has said I am in violation, but my neighbor down the street is doing the same thing and they aren't doing anything to them for violating." Picking and choosing which rules to enforce, at least perception-wise, I'm not saying it happens, but we as people, again, we're people, we're human, we at least believe we're being picked on for things. Does that cause any issues when we talk about enforcement if an association or anybody was to say, "Hey, you're in violation, now we're going to enforce that restriction against you"? Picking and choosing people of enforcing specific restrictions, does that have any effects on the ability to enforce?
It doesn't, Justin, have really a difference on the ability to enforce, and that's because you're supposed to apply all of the rules uniformly. Occasionally, we'll see an association where, for some reason, a lot is carved out. Like every lot just abuts the street, but this one is on a corner. So maybe the rule is different about the ones on the corners as to where they put their garbage cans versus the people. So you can run into differences that are built into the documents. But normally, with most rules, most of the requirements of the Declaration, those are supposed to be applied universal. And what we will hear all the time is, and this just happened at the coast. Somebody had 20 chickens. They're not, since you brought up chickens, I'll mention chickens. They had 20 chickens. The Declaration said 0 chickens, no fowl, no poultry. I mean, it wasn't one of those vague ones. It was very clear, none. And they had a whole farm of chickens. And of course, one of their responses was, "Well, Justin has chickens too." Well, that's not a defense to the 20 chickens. In fact, the board's reaction was, "Justin has chickens? We didn't know Justin had chickens, but thank you for telling us, because now we need to go talk to Justin." I mean, it's often that the board does not know that someone else is in violation, but that wouldn't stop the first violation. It would more imply that the board needs to treat everybody equally. And of course, I'll mention, Justin, at the end of the day, in terms of democracy, a homeowners association is sort of where the rubber hits the road. If you don't allow chickens and people want chickens, there's an easy fix to that. You can amend the Declaration to allow a chicken or 2 chickens or 20 chickens or however many chickens you want. As you mentioned a bit ago about the marketplace, if the board is enforcing something and the membership is like, we don't want you to do that, that usually ends up with either the board not being the board anymore and another group being the board, or the association decides they want to amend the documents and they change whatever the rule it is so that something else is done. We see amendments all the time these days dealing with everything from animals to short-term rentals to rentals to the same things you're probably familiar with from seeing it in the news lately.
Somebody's always snitching, Jim. You know that. Come on. Someone's violating that. I want to do something at my house. You know, someone's always snitching because they want to be able to do it too, and they weren't allowed to.